This is the Mettle podcast, and I am your host, Coach Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mettle podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome.
And welcome back to the Mettle podcast. I'm your host, Coach Thomann, and I am with my host today, Tammy Barlette, and this is my first conversation with Tammy, so we'll see how this goes. So this is one of these things of how algorithms can work for you. I'm on LinkedIn, and they always say, hey, maybe you should check out this person or check out this person. And Tammy's name pops up, and Tammy does, and she'll be able to tell us about that, but Tammy does like cockpit coaching, like the same sort of coaching that I do, but she's doing it for pilots, which I was immediately intrigued because one of the things I always talk about athletics is controlled adversity. It's adversity. It's really hard for kids and for athletes of all kinds, but it's controlled in the sense that it's not life or death. And it's like, it feels like it sometimes to as an athlete or for a kid, it feels like it, but Tammy's working on stuff that is absolutely life and death. And so I just want to see the crossover here, what I'm getting right, how we can help each other and see what connections we have. So Tammy, if you would, please give us some of your background. I know you were a pilot. I know you were in the Air Force, and I'd love to hear some of your background as we get going.
Yeah, I grew up as an athlete, so I think that applies here. So I have some experience. I was soccer, gymnastics, and track. And then when I was in college, I decided I wanted to join the military. And because I knew I wanted to complete a degree, I went and sought out the Air Force ROTC program. And I was just planning on serving my country, doing the 4 years or seeing how it went. And one of the first questions they asked me, as they do probably any student who walks into Air Force ROTC, is, do you want to be a pilot? And I paused for a long time, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I honestly had never thought of it. I didn't know any pilots, definitely didn't know any female pilots. And that was the first time it really been brought up to me. And I thought, I want an office in the sky. That sounds cool. Sure.
Sounds good. Right on. Let's go.
I was a roller coaster kid, a tree climber, gymnast. I thought this is perfect.
I gotta say though, what strikes me as funny is that you went to Air Force ROTC and you go in and you are surprised by the question, do you want to be a pilot? Right?
Yeah, it's a little naive. I get it. But I just was thinking, I want to serve my country. That's all I was thinking at the time. I was really had narrow vision at the moment. So I said, yeah, I want to try that. And I applied, I took all the tests. I got into the program. I got a pilot slot. I did end up going to pilot training. In pilot training, I did well enough where I went down the fighter bomber track, meaning they split you up at the time, whether you went and flew big aircraft and helicopters, or you went down flying like the fast jets. So I was on the fast jet track. My first assignment was actually to stay at pilot training though, as an instructor, which it's a huge compliment, but it's like a big pause because you're thinking you're going to go fly a fighter jet. And then they're like, okay, you're going to go teach students how to spin and take off and land and get puked on. So here you go. But I actually learned, I absolutely loved it. And then once that tour was over, I flew the mighty A-10 Warthog, which is a single seat attack aircraft that carries a lot of weapons.
That's the one that goes, it's got that noise, and it's really awesome. Yeah.
The aircraft is actually built around a 30 millimeter gun that has 1,170 rounds. So it's a very aggressive big aircraft, but it defends our troops on the ground.
Okay.
And then I had cervical spine reconstruction in 2006. So I transitioned to fly unmanned platforms. So I was sitting in Tucson or Las Vegas flying a plane that was in Iraq or Afghanistan. And then I got an exception to policy to go back into a high G aircraft for my neck. And then I spent my last 6.5 years teaching in the T-38, which is like a fighter trainer. If you've seen the movie Armageddon, there's a scene towards the beginning where they put the guys in an aircraft and fly them around a little bit. That's NASA's version of the T-38, but it is a T-38. That's what that was. So I taught in that, ending my career because I absolutely loved instructing. And I retired from the Air Force in 2018. And I went into professional speaking, where I started a business called Athena's Voice, which I still run it. It's a speaking referral business where people can come to find speakers. We have 10 female military pilots that go out in the world and speak. But I discovered my true passion was mental performance training. And I actually discovered that by creating my own personal keynote, because you had to figure out what is your message. And my message was all about not quitting. How do you not quit? But I didn't really know how. I just was like, you just do it.
Yeah.
So I had to reverse engineer the how. And when I did that, that's when the light bulb came on. And I realized I had essentially been using mental performance training techniques naturally. And then I went and got a certification in it, because I realized when I was instructing, I was using those techniques as well. And it was I realized how powerful it was. And so I thought, why aren't pilots doing this? We are literally, our life, like you said, is on the line all the time. And you can't just pull over on a cloud and just go, I'm just going to take a break and figure this out. Like, you have to figure it out. So your mind has to stay in the game. So that's when I started CrossCheck, which is mental performance training specifically for aviators.
Yeah. And what the idea is, what's really interesting to me is, we've all got our brains, and our nervous system works in a couple different ways. And, we all know what it's like to be in the fight or flight, right? But we don't always make great decisions when we're doing that. And I don't know how you, I don't know how that you I'm guessing, and I know nothing about flying, but you probably don't want to be in that state all the time when you're flying, making decisions.
No, you don't. I mean, yeah.
That's got to be hard not to.
It's the training that comes in. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because when I was a student, I remember thinking, if I have an emergency, I don't know how I'm going to react. What if I freak out? Just like you're saying, that fight or flight reaction. And what I discovered was the training was so thorough and so intense. And they put us in very difficult, stressful situations intentionally, where we practiced it, essentially. So when I had those moments where I had an emergency, you just you go into mode. Like, they teach you what to do. They teach you little phrases like aviate, navigate, communicate, in that order. And, like, I'm going to maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take the proper action, and land as soon as conditions permit. So when you get into these situations, you have these steps that you apply. It's like, like they say, eat an elephant one bite at a time, or you go up a mountain a few steps at a time. You make these small. You can break down a difficult situation the same way. Like, hey, I'm going to maintain control first. Now what's next? And you take these small steps. Fly the plane first.
Yeah, no,
make sure you don't hit the ground.
I love being intentional. Having training and being intentional is obviously, you got to have it. But what is it that's, I don't want to say what is it that's missing from that training, but what is it that you're with CrossCheck? What do you add to that training?
Well, see, what's happening is I am focusing on the civilian aviation community.
Okay.
And although the military can use this as well, the military has a much more robust training system that makes people feel much more supported. You go through pilot training. It's 1 year. It's very intense. You're surrounded by people just like you, going through the same things as you. And you have these connections, and there's instructors there around who have lots of training. And, whereas those in the civilian community, oftentimes when they're flying, they're out on their own, and they're trying to figure this out by themselves. I mean, regardless, a lot of people, if you go back to your question, really, what can you do to help the military if you already do all these things?
Yeah.
Some of it is just a matter of recognizing that it's your mindset. A lot of people, that's what they would take the training and they would just check the box and move on and not truly apply it. So sometimes one of the things I do with the students is go, hey, where is your mind right now? because a lot of them would just let their emotions take over, just like you do in sports. Sometimes your emotions just grab you, and you have to kind of pull yourself back and go, wait a minute, what's happening here? And are these truly self-awareness and your own thoughts are the basis of where I take this training.
Yeah, and that's going to be the first crossover I see right there when you're talking about. It's one of the things when I'm working with athletes the first time. We really focus on recognition at first, because if you want to change anything, you at least have to figure out where your mind is, how you're processing things, when you get upset, what really triggers you. You have to have some recognition. You just have to. It's and I think that is a really good thing, but it also comes with a little bit of pain at first, right? The more you start to recognizing things, you always you start to realize, oh, I do have some issues I need to deal with, and I think a lot of people shut down at that point. They're like, I don't want to dig into that, really.
Right. For my course in particular, I have found that I can only train people who are interested. I mean, you're the same way, who are interested in this. So either what I'm getting at is, I wouldn't go take this to a flight school and say, give this to everybody. It'd be great. They'd all love it. Because if a person is not in a place where they see the power of your mind, or they're struggling, they're gonna be like, this stuff's stupid. It might seem like that, but once you get someone who either A, recognizes the power of what your mind can do, or B, they're to a point where they're like, wait, I'm struggling. I've never struggled before. What the heck's happening? And they're desperate to be successful. Then they will go, oh, I'm causing a lot of this struggle myself by just my own thoughts.
I love that, because that's when I first started working with athletes. I would take, you start a business, and I would take almost any client. Somebody would get a hold of me and be like, hey, I want you to work with my son or my daughter. And I'd be like, okay, I can help. And then what I found out is I can help if the athlete wants me to help. If they don't want me to help, I'm wasting our time. We are wasting our time. So luckily now I'm to the point that I'll meet with a parent, I'll talk to them, and I'll do these things. But then I'm like, okay, I want to meet with your kid. And they're like, well, it'll be fine. I'm like, no. Look, I want an athlete that wants to get better at the mental side of things. You have to want to be coached. You just do. And not everybody's there. They just aren't. And I don't know if we could figure out how to do that. I think we'd have more business, you and I both, and every coach in the world. But I think that it takes some personal struggle to get there at first.
Yeah, it does. I mean, a lot of people don't want to be self-aware, because that means they have to take ownership of whatever it is that's causing them the struggle. Because it's a lot of times it's within them, within us. It's not some outside force that's causing us. That's usually when we're deflecting. So, one of the things I like to say is there's three things. If you want to be elite at anything, sports, business, whatever, you have to train three things. You have to train your skill set, so your expertise in whatever it is you do. You have to train your body. Those two things we all get. But the third area that is even often neglected or completely ignored is training our minds. But what I'm seeing is that professional athletes are investing big time, monetarily, and a lot of time into mental performance training, because they are learning that that is the one thing that's setting them apart from everyone else.
Again, I agree with you on it. We're going to agree a lot here, I can already tell, which is fantastic. But what's really interesting to me is when I'm working with athletes, they take a parent, their kid plays basketball, football, whatever, and they're more than happy to put in time and effort into the skill set, time and money into the physical. They'll get them to a gym and stuff like that, but they don't invest much in the mental. But you know what? The mental is the one they're gonna need when the sport's over. And that's it's like I think, and you and I were talking about this before, I think people think that it's just going to happen on its own, or it's just a genetic thing that you're born with or not.
Yeah. So I have a really funny way to explain mental performance training and why I think it matters. So I think that most people okay, so have you ever trained a cat? Let me ask you that. Have you ever trained a cat?
My daughter has one and she tries to train it, but yeah.
Tries, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
have you trained a dog?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you would. Would you ever get a dog and not train it?
No.
Just let it do whatever, roam
No, I
around your
wouldn't.
house?
No,
That's
yeah.
just dumb, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So most people, I think, they see their minds like a cat. It is what it is. I can't really do anything about it. I'm not going to bother training it because it's not really in my control anyway. So whatever. When our minds, in my opinion, are they're dogs.
Mm-hmm.
You can ignore it and not train it, but that's not going to be very good for you. So you absolutely need to train your mind because it is trainable. But people just don't want to invest in that because they don't recognize the power of training their mind. But I'll tell you, when I have people complete my course who actually do the work and invest in it, they're in shock.
No amount of athletic talent or physical ability can overcome a poor mindset. Anxiety, fear, and negativity will always diminish an athlete's abilities and limit their success. If you're not intentionally developing your child's mental toughness, then they are not reaching their full potential. Mental Mettle Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle.
And it's so heartwarming to be able to help people in this way. They're like, wow, I'm so much more effective and efficient in my sorties, in my flights when they're flying. And a lot of times they say things like this decreased my anxiety, not only in flying, but in life, because I'm controlling my thoughts. I'm aware of what I'm thinking. Because the way I like to say, if I were to print out a book of one day of all your thoughts, first of all, would you share it with anyone?
Right.
Most people say no, and that's fine.
Nope.
I get it.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. If you, not you particularly, but maybe some of your clients, if we printed out a book with all those thoughts and everything that was negative was in red, how much red font are you going to have in your book?
Right.
Probably.
No,
and that's not good.
It's not good. And it's the same thing. I will talk to athletes and we'll talk about that inner voice and the way they talk to themselves. And I'll ask a similar question. I'm like, the things that you say to yourself, would you ever think of saying it to a teammate? You're like, oh my gosh, I would never say that to another person. What are you doing saying it to yourself? Right? Like, why would you never say that to them? Well, because it would just beat them down and it would make them feel terrible. Okay, let's keep going. What's it gonna do to you? And I think that there is a badge of honor that people say is like, well, I'm my harshest critic, right? And it's just okay. And I'm like, it's not though. It's just not. I think that a negative voice can be a short-term motivator.
Yeah.
But a long-term, it is not useful, and it does a whole lot more harm than good. So
it does. And I think that people, and I'll explain this in a second, people will often use a bowl instead of a strainer, meaning they have a mistake, something goes wrong. They this mistake and everything about it, everything that contributed to the mistake goes into a bowl. And they're like, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to make sure I never do this again. And they carry this bowl around like, okay. It's a bunch of negativity when the truth is they really need to use a strainer. So where the strainer, that crap goes into the strainer and they see the negative stuff, they filter it through, they go, oh, yep, I'm gonna learn that. They're curious, like what caused this? But then what's left? The gem. The gem of information is left like, oh, well, I did this. The root cause of the problem was I did this, so that happened. So that's the thing. That's my gem. I'm going to keep. The rest of it it needs to go away. It has to go away. You cannot carry that crap around. You need to get rid of it and keep that gem that you strained out and go, hey, this sucks that this happened to me, but I'm so glad it did, because now I know that when this happens, and this is how I need to
Yep.
fix that.
In athletics, I like to say, forget the loss, remember the lesson. And
Yeah.
it's the same idea. You just can't. And I think that positive psychology gets a bad rap because I think people think that haven't experienced it and haven't tried it, think that it means you're just walking around being positive all the time and never trying to get better and never like noticing anything that's bad. And that's not what it is. It's training your brain to think things that are positive and trying to get better at things without letting the negativity just absolutely crush your soul, which it can.
Yeah, it absolutely can.
Talk to me about when you talked about reverse engineering it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you managed to do it, but you didn't have the training really to do. You had the military training, but you picked out what you needed to put in for civilian and for other people. Talk about that reverse engineering and what you found out about yourself, if you don't mind, and how you apply that now.
Yeah, well, like I said, what was happening is people they said to me, how do you do everything you do? And how do I was like, I don't know, you just do it. And like I said, that's not helpful to anybody to just say, oh, you just
No.
do it. And I realized that for me, a lot of it came down to my thoughts. I remember so many moments in my life where I was just completely defeated. And, I just kind of go through the feelings of it all. And then suddenly I'd just rise up and I'd be like, screw this. I'm going back out there. I'm getting this done. I'm doing it. I wasn't going to let whatever that was happen. So I think some of it for me, I realized that I was processing through the struggle, where a lot of people like to, what I call the enemies within, your inner critic. You can bury it. So like let's say something goes wrong. A lot of times people will go home and they'll just dig back into preparation. They'll go right back into preparing for whatever it is that they screwed up, the thing that they fixed, instead of working on their mind. And I didn't know I was doing this. Like I said, this is where I kind of was reverse engineering. But when I would have a struggle, I would come home, and although intellectually I wanted to just go into prep mode and start prepping again and fixing whatever it was I screwed up, something always stopped me and said, nope, you need to feel this. You need to let it out. And, that looks different for everybody. It could be journaling, could be working out, could be crying, could be punching something, not someone. But, everybody has their own way of processing. And if you don't process through the emotions of the struggle, these enemies within don't go anywhere. They just get buried, and then eventually they multiply and take over. So what I learned is the way I like to describe it to help people get through this is, even though in these moments, I still intellectually, as I'm processing through this stuff, thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get back to preparing, I let myself do it anyways. And the way I like to describe it is, it's like you wouldn't go run a race with a weight vest. So take the time to process through those emotions and remove that weight vest, which is what that's doing, so that when you do go back to attack that goal, you're more effective and more efficient because you don't have the weight of that burden on you anymore.
Yeah, but processing your emotions, that's a sign of weakness, though, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, but that's what you and I were talking. Like, it's the military can kind of be that way. Athletics can be, depending on the sport, but some athletics are really much like that. It's like, if you you can't even accept weakness or emotions.
I understand. Yeah.
No, I like.
Yeah.
Well, that's the stigma. That's the taught. That's what we're taught,
Right.
whether it's on purpose or on accident. That's what we're taught, and I think it's number one that we have to. That's one of the things you have to, as a coach, you have to combat before anything else.
Well, I'll be quite authentic with you and tell you that a lot of times for me, okay, so a lot of times when men, and I'm going to generalize here, I apologize.
It's
I'm
perfectly
going to
fine
do it.
I do the same thing. I agree.
When
No offense
men
will be taken here. Yeah.
When men get frustrated with themselves, they typically get angry, right? Want to punch something. Well, when I get really frustrated with myself, and I want to cry, and that's just my reaction, and it sucks because there's no crying and flying. That's the phrase. There is no
Mhm.
crying and flying, because you better keep it together. And I was able to do it most of the time. It was when the person looked at me and said, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Oh my God, don't ask me that question,"
Yeah.
because it tells me you care, and then I'm going to show you. Um,
Yeah.
I could normally hold it together, and I would, when I got home, that's when I would deal with it. And that's my recommendation to everyone. There is a time and a place to process those emotions. Like I tell my daughter, she's a little gymnast, and we went to a meet out of town, and we were about to leave to go to the meet. And I looked at her, said, "Do you have your backpack?" And she looked at me and she realized she did not have her grips
Mhm.
for the bars. And she started to lose it. And I said, it's okay. You can have this emotion later. I said, right now, you need to figure out, we just need to focus on what you can do. So we got upset about it later. And that's my recommendation to people as best as possible. If they know that they're going to give themselves grace to do this and deal with it later when it's private and in a safe place, they can usually push through the struggle a little easier. Knowing on the backside, when I go home, I'm going to let it out and it's okay in a safe place. Even though, like I said, when I did it, it felt like, oh, I shouldn't do this. And that was society's idea of what was acceptable, holding me back, saying, oh, you shouldn't do this. You have to let society's thoughts about what's okay go and recognize what matters for you. So if you're at home in a safe place and you want to journal, you can free journal, like just write whatever you want
Mhm.
down and then put it in the shredder if you want. I don't care. But like, you have to find a way to get it out.
And that means, what that means is that you have to purposely go back to that moment. And I think that's what a lot of
Yeah.
people don't do. It's like, I'll push it down and I'll keep it, and I'm not going to deal with it later. I'm just going to be like, oh, I'm fine. Right. And you're not fine. And
Mm-mm.
because now there's probably some benefit to, in the moment, like letting that emotion out and do that. But in athletics, in flying, in life, there's times just like, I got to get something done. I can't stop every minute that I'm feeling something. And, like, you can't stop in the middle of a game or in the middle of a sortie and be like, oh, I need to process this, because it doesn't work. Right. But you
Right.
have to be willing to go back to it. And I agree with you on the, free journaling and just writing. You can't write and not think. And I think that that's a useful tool, even if you're going to throw it away. It's a great tool.
And I believe you should handwrite, because it needs
I,
to slow your brain down and, so it
I
can
agree.
focus on just that, not being all over the place.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of research
There is.
that's behind that as well. There's a connection to it. It's really good. What sort of so talk to me, like, you talked about the first step is recognition when you're talking about these civilian pilots. Like, once you get
Mhm.
a little bit of recognition and role, what are some of the tools that you use to really start to build that confidence?
Well, I think the biggest thing is starting off with that self-awareness. Like, you have to first of all recognize what you're doing to yourself, and that a lot of it is you. And that's when people kind of have the light bulb go on and they're like, wow, I had no idea. Like, I'll have them journal and write, like, just, this is what I really want is, and they write that down and they see some crazy things in there. So recognizing what it is. And I think too, it's really important to help you figure out what it is you want. Because if you don't know what you want or why you're doing it, then it's really hard to keep going. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm not flying because, A, I'm flying because of B. And then it's a little more motivating. They have to have their own reasons to do it. Not, oh,
Mm-hmm.
my dad wants me to be a pilot, or same thing with sports. They have to find their own reasons. Like I told my daughter, I said, I know sports is very social to you right now, but before you graduate high school, if you think you're going to play in college, you need to figure out why you run for you, not
Mm-hmm.
why you run to be social. That's cool, but you have to have more to it than that. So I think digging down to the why, why are you doing it, whatever it is you're doing? And is it really in line with your personal core values and what matters to you? Or are you doing it for someone else? Because there's not a lot of foundation there when it's for someone else. So the other thing I do is I teach a little bit of mindfulness. Just, hey, slow down and give yourself some time to just be at peace. Like, you can't just go constantly. When you go constantly. I mean, and this is something that I've been teaching, and I still have to force myself to sit
Mm-hmm.
down and take 10 minutes to just, meditate just for 10 minutes, because I'll tell you that I still, before I start, I go, I have 1,000 things to do. I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. But if I take that 10 minutes or 15 minutes to sit down, even 5 would be beneficial for someone who's doing nothing. If I do that, then the rest of the day will be much more effective, because what I like to help describe people is they forget to think about the fact that, or maybe they don't recognize that we only have so much thought energy.
Yeah.
And people don't think about thought energy. They think about, I'm tired, my body's tired, but they don't think about that thought energy. So a good example is when, a group of people, you say, hey, let's go out to eat. And they're like, where do you want to go? You're like, I don't know. I can't even think. You just decide.
Right.
That's when you're out of thought energy, and you need to protect that. So think about where you're using it. That's one thing I have them think about, their thought energy. And, we do, like I said, we do the journaling, we do some mindful things, and just kind of become aware of our thoughts, because that's the biggest thing right there.
Yeah, I think mindfulness is, I think if you haven't practiced it and you're not into it, you think it's a waste of time. You're like, I have too much time to do to stop and meditate. And it can seem counterintuitive from that. I get that. But the amount of time saving and the efficient work that you will do is well worth the time. I tell coaches, a lot of athletics, like in high school, the practices happen right after school, right? You got a kid, you got a whole group.
You got to reset.
You have to
before you
they
start.
Come to you, they've been dealing with their boyfriends, girlfriends, social people in their social circles, tests, all this, and you're expecting them to jump right in and be ready to go and be upset whenever they can't remember a play or remember something they're supposed to do. It's like they're not in the right state of mind. And if you take 5 minutes and do some breath work and mindfulness at the beginning of your practice, it's a reset button, but also mindfulness is a practice that the more you practice it, the more you're able to use it whenever things start to hit the fan, right?
Yep. Yeah, we do that as well. I teach them.
If I know if you have somebody that has never practiced mindfulness or breathing and they are upset about something and you go up to them and say, hey, you just need to breathe. They can't do it. Right?
No, I know.
Right? It's a practice. You have to practice it. So I love what are some of do you have any specific mindfulness techniques that you love to use?
Well, I like to focus on breathing, but the thing that the key for me is a lot. I think a lot of people, especially if they're type A athletes and they're just go-getters, they I used to think I can't meditate. There's no way I can get my mind to be blank, because that's what I thought it was, until I learned that it's all about control. So when I was taught that, okay, sit there quietly and focus on your breath. And if you find your mind wandering to that play you screwed up yesterday in the game or whatever, and you recognize that, bring it back, bring your mind back to your breathing. You're still meditating, because essentially you're practicing control of your mind. And it's when you let your mind wander and go away to that play, and you recognize it and then go, no, I'm just going to keep thinking about this game yesterday and work through that. Now you're not meditating anymore. So it's a matter of just, your mind can wander 50 times, but what you'll notice is that over time, and you'll get better and better at bringing it back under control. And that control right there can apply to your game when you're playing, because now you're teaching your mind to be under your control more readily. And so that's one of the things I teach is just bring it back to control. And then I like them to have a word. I call it their power word. And I said, you need to practice this on the ground. Take a deep breath in, think of that power word that makes you feel confident and capable, like you're an amazing pilot, or in this case, an amazing athlete, whatever it is you want to feel. And then, breathe out and make sure that emotion comes every time you do that, so that when you're in the middle of a game, no, you're not going to stop, close your eyes, take a deep breath and think of your power word. That's ridiculous. But because that word is now associated with that feeling you want, the more you practice that out of the game or out of the cockpit, the easier you can access it in the cockpit by just simply thinking of that word and taking that breath.
Yeah.
Your mind goes, oh, I know where to go now.
Yeah. And I think again, I agree 100%. There's some of the so many similar things that I do. I'll work with an athlete. We'll talk about confidence or something like this, or their anxiety for an hour, come up with a phrase or a word. It's really going to mean something to them at that point.
Yeah.
And I always tell them to practice 2 ways. I practice it proactively, like
Mhm.
every day, and then reactively when you need it. And
Yeah.
you
Off the
can't
field.
just do it reactively. You have to practice it proactively. This is, and I think a lot of people think that this stuff is a little bit woo-woo. Like, it's like,
I agree.
is it?
Yep.
Yeah, well, they do.
Yeah.
Because
It's okay.
honestly, Tammy, I was probably there.
I was there, totally.
Right. Like, I was there.
Yeah.
But I love that more and more research is coming out showing, like, they see brain scans. Your mind, like, a person in an anxious state they could put a brain scan. I don't know if they've done this because it's hard to do, but they could put someone in a cockpit in an anxious situation and show what part of their brain lights up.
Yeah.
And then you could train that person for 3-4 months, put them in the same situation, and a different part of their brain would light up and they would feel more confident and more likely to succeed.
Right.
I love that. I just love that it takes the woo-woo out of it and makes it an actual scientific it's a real thing. It's a real who knew, right? Our brains are a real thing. Like, they're moldable. It's that the worst expression out there is you can't teach an old dog new tricks, because it's just not true.
No, it's not true. Yeah. And, you're talking about sports and being anxious and stuff. One of the things I learned as a pilot that I wish I'd learned as an athlete, because it would have been really helpful to me, is they have this story. I went to weapon school, which is like the Top Gun of the Air Force, their version of Top Gun, essentially. And I remember I was getting ready for a flight, and one of the guys looks at me and he's like, "Hey, you're a pinger. You're like ping, 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 ping off the walls, like everywhere. I was like, really? And I was like, oh, thinking like, that's not good. And so I made some very intentional changes, or so I thought. So a couple weeks later, they're like, "Tammy, you are still pinging." I'm like, looked at him and I said, "Well, clearly that works for me, so I'm just going to go with it."
Yeah.
But what I didn't know at the time is that we all have a different level, and this, but a different level of activation where we find our ideal performance, like where we perform the best. And for some reason, society makes us think that if we're cool and calm walking around the sidelines, or before whatever it is you do, then you're ready. So what happens to our brains is that, and I know I'm just teaching your people now, this, but what happens to us is that when we tell ourselves, like, we feel those feelings of your body actually that's getting ready, saying, "Hey, this matters to me, so I'm going to give you this adrenaline. I'm going to make your stomach feel a little weird. I'm going to make you feel like you have to go to the bathroom all the time. You're going to be a little shaky. Like, these are things to help you because I'm activating you to the right level." What our minds typically do is we go, "Oh, I'm nervous." And that nervousness that thought hinders us, because now it tells our brain goes, "Oh, I'm not ready." So I actually intentionally tell not just my pilot students, but my kids and other athletes, when you start to say, "I'm nervous," I want you to substitute that word with "I'm excited," because if you think about it, it is the exact same thing. You get butterflies in your stomach. You have to go to the bathroom a lot. You get a little shaky. So tell yourself, you might not believe it right away, but tell your brain, "I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited." And that way you're not hindering yourself by, your brain's not going to interpret it as not ready. You go, this is my body saying this matters.
Yeah.
So accept it. And for me, like, I have a high level of activation. When I'm performing my absolute best, I am like a pinger, and that is okay. I've learned that's good for me. It's not good for everyone, but it's good for me.
You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today. Parents of athletes know that confidence and belief are fundamental for success. We want them to play without fear and without anxiety, but once those negative thoughts take over, it can derail years of work. Turning that anxiety into belief is similar to building strength and speed. It just takes intentional effort over time. Mental Mettle Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule a free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete.
Because I have a story when I was in gymnastics and I had to do 10 beam routines on the high beam for practice. I remember I did these front walkovers where you put your hands down and then your foot, so it's a blind move. And I got nervous every single time, like that feeling of, And I remember thinking to myself, Tammy, you have never missed your foot, ever. Just do it. And so I just kind of took a deep breath and calmed myself down, and I did it. I missed. And I ripped my ACL.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize that actual nervous feeling or excited feeling or what, it was helping me. I needed it. And I got rid of it because I thought it was bad.
And there we go again on the recognition. Kind of know what you are a little bit. And it just really helpful, because once you start to realize what your activation energy and how you perform your best, well, you start to be able to control it a little bit better, understand it, and be okay with it. One of the things that when I talk to parents is, and parents love to do this when their kid is anxious, and there's levels of anxiety, right? There's stuff that we have to deal with a little bit, but parents love to tell their kid, oh, you need to just go relax and have fun. Well, that's not how they operate, right? And we want them to feel excited. This is something that matters to them, right? Mm-hmm. And if we just try to train them to say, oh, just have fun, it doesn't matter, it's just a game, well, then just go do something else, right?
Yeah.
Or go do something that you really love and figure out how to control that a little bit. And look, and I think the thing that we need to mention here is we're talking about changing the way you think and your recognition and using neuroplasticity and changing neural pathways and things like that. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it easy? Yeah. No, not at all. Right? This takes a substantial amount of time and energy. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. I think it's important that, like, when I tell people to tell yourself you're excited, I will tell them, I said, it's going to feel fake at first. When you start doing this, you're like, oh, I'm excited. But if you're patient with yourself, give yourself some time and start it, don't expect that as soon as you say that, you're going to suddenly feel excited. That's an expectation that's too big. You have to just do this slowly in small steps, and it will over time, it will change.
And I agree 100%. But you have to be okay with that. It's not a magic wand. Coaching is not a magic wand. It's not something that I can just say, hey, do this tool and you're going to be fine. Right. It's when you work with, so you got to have people that want to do it. You work with pilots that want to do it. You start with the recognition. How long is the process whenever you work with somebody?
Well, I don't do one-on-one. I actually have a program. So I teach a course. It's a 4-week course. Okay. And it's drip released, meaning they can't consume all the content in one sitting.
There you go.
One started yesterday. It's 45 minutes to an hour of videos. And then I have action items, or I don't call it homework because it's not something you can sit down and do and it's done. It's something you integrate into your life.
Yes.
So it's an action item, and they also do some aviation specific stuff because it's tailored for pilots, but the content applies to anybody, right? So then they do that for a week. We have a discussion group at the end of the week because I think it's important to talk about it and have this actual coaching piece and learn there's other people out there just like you having the same issues that you have. And then another a week later, another hour of content is released. They're just short videos explaining different pieces of the process. And by the end, it's 4 weeks. And I would say that the interesting thing is that I gauged what things have changed, and confidence is one of them. And I'm not surprised though. The confidence does increase, but over 4 weeks, it's really difficult to actually change how confident you feel.
Mm-hmm.
But in most people, there is a slight change. But where I see the most change is in control. When I'm talking about controlling your emotions and being aware of what's happening, that's going to happen first before you can change your confidence. You have to feel in control.
Yeah, and understand. I think with that goes understanding what you can control and what you can't control. Right.
That's one of the exercises.
I think.
Are you familiar with that one?
Well, I'll tell you, and I told you the first time I did any therapy, I was in a bad way, and I was doing all this stuff, and the therapist said, "Well, you know that you're just you're just focusing on things you can't control. What can you actually control?" And I'm like, "Well, I've got a really big ego, so I think that there's a lot of things I can control." And she's like, "Well, you need to start figuring that out because you actually can't." Right? And I think that, but that's hard for people to. Again, it's scary to start to realize. When you start making a list of things in your life that you can and can't control, the list of things you can't control that you actually care about is a whole lot longer than things you can. And I think that people don't like that. Makes them feel insignificant, but I think it helps center us.
It's powerful though. That's one of the exercises that these pilots find very helpful. They're like, wow, I've been focusing so much energy on worrying about something I cannot even control. So there's that piece. There's the whole idea of process-based goals, so they can feel like they have more control over the little things.
Yeah.
And giving themselves credit along the way instead of waiting until I want to have this perfect check ride. Okay, well that's great. But what if you fail your check ride? You're going to feel like a big failure.
Yeah.
But if along the way you say, on the daily basis, I'm going to give my credit for studying for an hour. I'm going to have a good attitude when I fly. I'm going to do 5 minutes of meditation. Like every day you give yourself credit for those things, whether we use a jar with marbles where you put marbles in for all those things. And at the end you have a jar full of marbles to go, look at all the work I put into this. Even if it doesn't work out, I put in the work and I can give myself credit for that. And too many people don't do that.
No, I agree because you have to celebrate the little things. You have to celebrate the growth. I think that when I work with athletes, I talk about goals, and they're always giving me goals that are well outside their control.
Yeah.
I want to be all conference. I want to be all state. I want to get this scholarship. I'm like, how do you plan to influence judges and influence coaches? And how do you plan to do this? Well, I guess I can't. I'm like, what you need to do is figure out what sort of traits you need that typically a all conference player has, or what do you need that typically a scholarship athlete has, figuring those out and start working towards those rather than, and have these process-based goals. Goals are problematic sometimes because they are. People set goals that are well outside their control, and then they get upset when they can't get there.
Right.
Like, I mean,
yeah. So we in the military, we work the target backwards. Like, what is the target? Okay. So, where is it? Is there going to be weather? Is there terrain I have to go around? What kind of weapons do I need to take that target out? What kind of approach angle am I getting? And you keep going backwards and backwards until you get to, launch. But you can't just go, there's the target. I'm going to go fly it. You're never going to hit the target because you don't have all the planning up to it,
Or Tammy, some people are born with enough skills and abilities to get there, to get those things, but they didn't do anything to get there. And when they get there, the next step, those people are really in trouble when things get harder. Because I see a lot of athletes that are really gifted athletes in high school that really didn't have to do much and then get into college, and they haven't built up the tools to gain this and do this process goals. And then they get there, they're like, I've just relied on my genetic gifts, and I don't know how to get better. And that's really problematic for a lot of people whenever,
It is problematic. And I used to, in pilot training, when people would show up at pilot training, I would teach this 3-hour class. And as part of it, I would draw a triangle on the top of the board. And I would say to them, hey, because all these people that showed up pilot training, they're the best of the best. I mean, you can't get a pilot slot. I mean, you have to. It takes a lot of schooling, a lot of just attitude, a lot of whatever. It's really challenging to get there, and they fight for these spots. And so you're surrounded now by a bunch of people who are the best of the best, and you can compare that to like somebody showing up on some elite college team where they finally made the team. So I draw this triangle on the board at the top, and I say, when it comes to pilots in the Air Force, where are you on this triangle? And same as, you could say the same thing to your new athletes. And they would probably be like, well, I'm on the bottom. And sometimes they're like, oh, I'm below it, something. But, it's underneath it. So then I would take that little triangle that's at the top of the board and I would extend it all the way down to the bottom of the board. And I'd see where that X, I'd say, look where the X truly is. In the reality of things, you may feel like you're on the bottom. And guess what? All of you are very good. But in this group, someone will eventually be the bottom who's never been at the bottom before. And you're going to wonder what the heck you're going to do. How do I suck? I can't believe I'm here. I don't belong here. And you start to have these negative thoughts that aren't good for you. At that moment is when you have to look and go, wait a minute, look how big this triangle really is. This is what it took to get here. I am talented. I am skilled. I just have to put in the work now to keep myself there.
Yeah. And like I said, you have to celebrate things. You have to. I think that is something that people skip that don't understand how confidence works. You have to celebrate the smallest, and you don't have to make it a big deal, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big deal.
You're putting marbles in a jar is celebrating it. You have to acknowledge growth. You have to acknowledge getting better. You have to acknowledge things that you've learned or work that you put in. That's how you get confidence. It is not otherwise I think it's fake confidence, right? Just if you just go out there and just try and learn a mantra and just say it, that you have to have something to back it up. And by the time you're dealing with somebody who's at the level you're dealing with, they can fly, or an athlete that I'm working with, they've got plenty of things that they can celebrate. Right? You have to, but if your mind goes negative, you don't get there.
I think the other thing that's really important too about the small celebrations, and we're not talking a party like you're saying. Let's put a marble in a jar to say, hey, I did the work today. Because a lot of times people who are at this level, these elite levels, they don't know when to stop. So for example, if I tell myself I'm going to study, I think a reasonable amount is an hour and a half every day or whatever it is. Okay. So I do that. I put the marble in the jar. I can go, okay, I can go watch a little TV now, which is help, whatever it is that helps you relax. I'm going to go, for a walk. I'm going to go do a puzzle. I don't care, but something other than that, because what happens is a lot of times people are like, well, I got to do more. I haven't done enough. I took an hour off to go walking or go do a puzzle. I should have been studying. No, that's why you set these goals so that you hit them and you can give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Which is powerful and good for you.
Yeah. I don't want to, we're short on time here, but I really, here's the thing. I'm sure you're aware of the guy, and I follow him. I've read the book Can't Hurt Me with David Goggins. You know Goggins, right? The guy that does all the running. So David Goggins, this guy, he was a Navy SEAL, and he does all these super crazy running exploits and things. And his thing is he uses this extremely negative voice and beats himself up, and he goes and gets posts that people say things bad about him, and he reads them out loud and puts them into a file and listens to him while he runs. And I'm like, and I hate it. I hate it because he's so successful, and I think people think that that's good. And his mind must be his mind and body are untouchable. He's in this 1%, because most people, that sort of negativity is they talk about that being the downward spiral into a whole lot of mental health issues with anxiety and depression if you just don't control that negative voice and that beating yourself up. So
yeah, I mean, it takes some power to overcome. I mean, when I went to weapon school, I went with, I had an 18-month-old baby and a 3-month-old baby, and people, when I showed up, they're like, she's never going to make it. And I needed to hear that. I hate to say it, but I needed it because I needed to go, okay, I gotta prove this to them. But that, I wouldn't say that's the method I would choose regularly.
No, like I said, I think it can be a short-term motivator. It can give you some stuff, but I think in the long term, I think it's going to cause some problems. So, yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Tammy. So last question here, last little bit of conversation. What did I miss? What did I not to ask you that I should have?
Oh, there's one thing I want to bring up that's super
Beautiful.
simple. So, you know how being at your absolute best, highest performing self, you need to be in the moment. I mean, ideally you'd be in flow state, right? But you can't always just get there, but you got to at least be present. So like if you think about someone flying a plane, I can't go, well, I can't believe that landing was terrible and I'm still flying the plane now. How you can't be there and still fly the plane in the moment. And obviously there's some thinking ahead you have to do as a pilot or in sports too, but I can't be thinking about next landing when I'm, doing some sort of maneuver in the area, like a loop or something. That doesn't make any sense. But people always ask, well, my mind is going other places, right? So how do you bring it back? And so when you find yourself what ifing, I think it's really important to get back the present moment by just simply saying to yourself, what now? What now? Like that's a simple technique that anyone can use when they find themselves in a place where they don't want to be mentally. Go, what now? What do I need to do right now? And bring themselves back to the moment, because it's so important to be in the moment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that and when you talk about flow, I could talk all day about that. I think that everybody needs to find something that gives them that flow. Something that like they don't even have to think about what's now. Like it's just so natural to them. And doesn't mean usually it's something you enjoy and something you're good at, but you don't have to be that good at it. You know what I mean? You could be you could love painting and the end result is terrible. But I think you have to have, but I think you got to have something like that. But it's a great idea because if you're thinking about, when we talk about things that we can control, right? And things that we can't control, the past and too far in the future are not controllables.
Right.
Yet we spend so much time on that. So I love the what now. It's a great question to ask yourself to kind of recenter. So yeah, it's a great, I asked and you answered and that's fantastic. So, Tammy, it's been a phenomenal interview. I really enjoyed talking to you. I love seeing, how coaching works for all walks of life, for all things. And I really loved that you said, when I'm helping them be a better pilot, I'm helping them have a better life too. And I think that's, I don't care if you're not a pilot, if you're not an athlete and you're listening to this, it doesn't matter. Like if you start to learn how to control your own thoughts and be the positivity and stuff, your life is going to be better. And it is something you can control. And I love the work that you're doing. You're an innovator with it, putting it into this area. And I applaud you for it, Tammy. It's fantastic.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. So, and hey, we'll chat again. This has been a great conversation. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today.
I don't care what you think of yourself. You are probably not as cool and as tough as Tammy Barlette. I mean, sure, there's other A-10 Warthogs pilots out there, and there's other women doing really crazy, cool jobs, tough jobs, important jobs while they're raising kids. Sure. But let's at least agree that she is in the upper echelon of coolness and toughness for jobs, right? Being able to do that, raise her family while flying a A-10 Warthog fighter jet that protects troops on the ground. And I mean, come on. That's one of the coolest interviews I've ever done. I mean, so cool. And the reason I got that interview with her is because I wanted to learn stuff. And honestly, I didn't know how it was going to go. I was really hoping that it would turn out like it did. And I was hoping that I would learn that the coaching that she does with pilots has at least anything similar with the coaching that I do with athletes. And what I found was it's the same. We use different terminology for the same things. And a good coach is going to find different ways to tweak things and use things for their clientele. But we do the same things. We start with recognition. We talk about celebrating little steps and the ways that we develop confidence and understanding how neurons can be changed in order to change our mental abilities. I mean, it's down the line. We're doing the same things. And that makes me feel really, really good. But here's what that should mean for you. It is easy for people to look at what I do. Whenever I work with a lot of young kids. I've worked with as young as 6th grade or so. And I work with junior high kids and stuff. And it's easy for people to look at that and go, well, yeah, but kids need that today because kids are soft. Right? They need a little mental training because they're just, we haven't done a good job of training these kids, and they're kind of soft, and they need this mental training, and it's good for those kids. And I did a assessment, a session the other day, and I never named names and stuff, but this is a gentleman. He was more my age, and we did an exercise on voices. He loved the exercise. We got done. We were talking about it, and he said that was a really cool exercise, and I'm really gonna take some of this, apply it to my voice, and help increase the positive voice and the way that I talk to myself. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I said, I love this exercise. I do it with kids all the time. And he goes, oh, I bet that's really good for kids. I'll bet that's really good for kids. They love this sort of thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're my age, and we just went through this, and you love it. Why do we have to say, oh, it's good for kids? No, it's good for people. And that's the point I'm trying to make here is I have done these exercises, these coaching exercises with young kids that are doing, sports, and they're worried about sports and athletics. And it's easy for us to go, well, they're just, it's good that they do that, but let's be honest, it's not the end of the world if the 4th, 5th, 6th grade basketball game, and it's not, right? I agree. But these same techniques are being used by Tammy Barlette in her program, helping pilots gain confidence in the cockpit so they don't crash jets and get people to where they need to be. Well, those are two ends of the spectrum, right? these kids that I work with to adults that are doing these very high, intense, important jobs. Well, then you probably, whoever you are, listener, fit somewhere between those two, right? You fall in there somewhere, which means these tools, these techniques will work for you. Tammy said it, I've said it. The most important thing about having success with a coach is that the client actually wants to get success and actually says, oh, I want to get better and I want to try coaching. If you don't want coaching to work, it won't work. If you do want coaching to work, it's going to work. And I think that's my ask right here, right now, is find a way, a reason that you want to get better. Find something that you want to improve on, something that you know you want your mental state to be better around. Go hire a coach and you will get better at it. You are just a few months away from really looking at things different in your life. You might be really successful at what you're doing. Athletes, you might be really successful at the level you're in. You could be really successful with your family right now. You could be successful at your job and your relationships right now. But life has a funny way of, putting us in a game or a mission or a situation that we might struggle with. Well, when you get to that point, that's where mental training can really help. She talked about to be really elite in something. There's 3 things you need. The first one is skill set. Athletes understand that. You gotta develop that skill set. You have to develop the physical strength, and athletes understand that. Parents of athletes understand that. They know you got to go to practice, and most of the time anymore, they want to put them to a physical trainer, right, and get stronger faster. Which it's part of the game now, whatever game you play. But then the third one is that mental training, and if you want to be elite, you have to start working on the mental training, so that when the game gets too big, or the mission gets too big, or the situation gets too big, you have some mental training to be able to fall back on and ready to use that. Just really cool to see that she does so many of the same things that I do and how we use it. Slightly different, but all the same. Very, very interesting interview. I really enjoyed it. And I'm definitely going to be stealing some of the stuff that she does. I think it's really cool. So my plea, my push, my ask here is consider a coach. If you want to get better at whatever you want to get better at, whatever area of your life, because remember, it doesn't matter if you're a young basketball, baseball, football player, or a pilot. She mentioned it. I say it all the time. If you use coaching to get better at whatever it is you want to get better at, the side effects, the positive side effects are you are going to get better at all areas in your life, less stress in your life. Like, we don't have to focus on your relationships, but your relationships will get better. We don't have to focus on your family. Those relationships are going to get better, right? Learning the mental tools, how to deal with stress, how to deal with situations in one area helps you in other areas. So find an area that you want a coach to help you with and go try it out. Remember, mental coaching. I work with athletes. I work with educators. But I'm also branching off to work with what I call tough guy coaching. Not because I have anything against coaching women or anything like that. I work with a lot of female athletes. So I do that all the time. But my point is, I really feel compelled to help men want to reach out. Tammy talked about it in the interview about our inclination is to get mad and just start punching things or push it down. And that's not healthy. That's really clear in the research that that's not healthy long term. So that's kind of why I reach out to guys. So if you are an athlete or you have an athlete that want to get more elite at their sport, give me a call. Educators, struggling administrators. I do a lot of work with schools. I just got into both those areas, athletics and education, because that's where I came from. So I know that. You can call me about that if you are interested, and you're kind of a bit of a tough guy, and you're like, I don't, I've thought about therapy, I've tried to coach, and I don't resonate with me. Well, if you don't mind a tough guy looking coach with a beard and looks like me, then maybe that'll help. I just want to try to help where I can. So you always reach out to me, see what we can do. If you're a pilot, maybe I could help, but maybe you should check out Tammy Barlette. I'll put some of her stuff in the comments in the show notes, because what a cool job she does, right? How cool. Just, again, super cool. So as always, remember to like and share. I get so many people all the time telling me they love the podcast. They love what I'm doing. And all they do is listen. Well, I want you to share. I'm asking you share, because this might help somebody else, right? Like, share, subscribe, all those things. So I genuinely appreciate the support. I love it. I love what I do. It's fantastic. Great interview, great podcast. And this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. And remember, till next time, forge your metal.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.